The left side of his face had gone. I saw it from 20 feet away, across a moving river of tourists, and my whole body knew before my mind caught up. An old man stood at the gilded railing outside the palace forecourt, one liver-spotted hand wrapped around an iron bar, and the corner of his mouth had slid down toward his collar like a candle left too near a flame. His left eye drooped with it. He was trying to smile at something. The changing of the guard, I think. The bright wall of red coats wheeling into place, and only half his mouth would obey him. I am a nurse. 22 years on a stroke ward will do this to you. It wires an alarm under your ribs that goes off on a public street, on a holiday, on a Tuesday morning when you swore you would not be a nurse for one single hour. I had come to this city to forget hospitals for a week, and there, against the iron railing, was a textbook face, drooped, slack on one side, the body telling its story before the man could. I started moving toward him, so did someone else. The guard. You have seen them in photographs, the tall black bearskin, the red wool tunic buttoned to the throat, the white gloves, the rifle held just so, the face like something carved for a tomb. They are famous for one thing above all others: they do not move. Tourists scream in their ears, wave, sing, dance, hold up signs. The men in the red coats look through them as if through glass. That is the whole performance, the discipline that draws the crowds, a man who will not be moved. This one had moved, not his feet, not yet. But his eyes had come off the middle distance and locked, hard, on the old man at the rail. I was perhaps 15 feet from the railing. The guard was inside the forecourt, behind his own line, maybe 30 feet from the old man and on a raised stone walk. Between them was a low chain, a knot of phone-waving sightseers, and 300 years of regulation that said a sentry on post does not break for anything short of fire or attack. He was already looking where I was looking. He had already seen the face. How? I have asked myself that 100 times since. I was trained to read that face. It took me 2 decades and 1,000 bedsides. He had no such training. He had a rifle and a posture and orders to stare at a fixed point above the heads of the crowd. And yet his gaze had dropped from that fixed point and found, in a sea of laughing faces, the one face that was quietly coming apart. I reached the rail. "Sir," I said to the old man, "Sir, can you look at me?" He turned his head, slowly. The whole left side lagged behind the right like a boat dragging an anchor. "I'm fine," he said, and the word fine came out soft and smeared, the consonants gone mushy, the way speech goes when one half of the machinery has stopped. "Just watching. Lovely, aren't they lovely?" "They are," I said. "What's your name?" "David." It took him 2 tries. "Don David." "David, can you smile for me? Big smile." He tried. God help me, he tried, and the right side of his face lifted into something cheerful and the left side hung there dead, and a string of saliva slipped from the fallen corner of his lip, and he did not feel it. He did not know it was happening. That is the cruelty of it. The face falls and the man inside still thinks he is smiling. Face, arm, speech, time, the 4 words every nurse carries, 3 were already lit up red. "David, can you lift both your arms for me? Straight out like you're holding a tray." He lifted the right. The left came up 6 inches and sank, slid off some invisible shelf, dropped back to his side. He looked at it with mild puzzlement, as if it belonged to a man standing next to him. I hid my phone half out of my pocket. I was already saying the words in my head: stroke, conscious, drooping, one-sided weakness, slurred speech, onset unknown, but I would say minutes, when a woman behind me jostled my elbow to get a better photo of the soldiers, and my phone spun out of my hand and skated under the railing, out of reach, onto the cobbles of the forbidden forecourt. I swore I am not proud of it. I lunged for the chain, and a steward in a peaked cap stepped smartly in front of me. "Madam, you can't cross there. Members of the public are not permitted past the—" "He's having a stroke," I pointed. My voice did the thing it does in a code, flat and loud and very calm, the voice that makes orderlies run. "That man, right there." He is having a stroke right now, and I need an ambulance, and I need it 3 minutes ago." The steward looked at David. He saw an old man at a rail, smiling crookedly at the pretty soldiers. He saw nothing wrong at all. "He looks all right to me, madam. Please step back behind." That is the thing about a stroke. To the untrained eye in those first minutes it can look like nothing. Like an old man tired in the sun. Like a man who has had a drink. Like a man simply standing still, the way the soldier behind him was standing still. The whole tragedy hides in plain sight, and the clock that decides whether a man walks again or never speaks again ticks down behind a face that looks, to a stranger, merely sleepy. The steward had his hand up to wave me off. I was about to climb the railing and let him drag me away, because I would rather be arrested at the foot of a palace than watch a brain die for the sake of good manners. And the guard left his post. I want to be exact about this because what I tell you next sounds like the kind of thing people invent, and it is not invented. I was there. I watched it. The men in the red coats are bound by a discipline older than any of us. They do not turn their heads. They do not speak. They are relieved, marched off, marched on. They are never simply absent from the post they have been set. To break that, to step off the line on your own judgment, with no order in front of 1,000 cameras, is to gamble your career, your honor, the whole long ladder you have climbed in that regiment, on a single read of a single face. He made the read in less than 2 seconds, and he stepped down off the stone walk. His boots came down on the cobbles with a crack like a starting pistol. The steward froze. The crowd's noise faltered, 1,000 people sensing, the way crowds do, that the rules had just changed and nobody had announced it. The guard came across that forbidden ground at a fast, controlled stride, rifle carried clear and high, and pointed at the sky, not at a soul. His face still that carved and unreadable mask, and the only thing in the whole world that betrayed what he had understood was the line he took. He did not come toward me. He did not come toward the steward, who was the one breaking a rule. He went straight to David, to the face, to the man who was, very quietly, against a gilded railing on a sunny morning, beginning to die. He reached the inner side of the railing, as David's knees began to fold. I had seen it coming, the slow lean, the right hand white-knuckled on the bar while the left hung useless, the weight shifting onto legs that had stopped taking orders. An old man does not crumple all at once. He sags, like a tent with one pole pulled. David was sagging, and the iron rail was the only thing holding him up, and the iron rail was about to become the thing that cracked his skull when his grip finally let go. The guard's white glove closed over David's wrist through the bars. Not a grab. I have grabbed 100 falling patients and I know the difference. This was a catch, firm, wide, the whole flat of the hand spread to take the load, and with his other arm he set the rifle's butt to the ground and held the old man up against the railing from the wrong side of it, the way you hold a gate that wants to swing. Then he spoke. The men in the red coats do not speak. This one did. "I have you, sir," low, even. A voice with the parade still in it, every word set down square. "I have you. You will not fall." And to me, without turning his head, in the same flat tone, "He needs to come over the rail or I need to come over it. Which is faster?" I will tell you the truth. In that instant I stopped being a frightened tourist and became, again, the thing I had sworn off for 1 week. Because that is the question. That is exactly the question a charge nurse asks the moment a patient starts to go. Not what happened, not whose fault, but which is faster. He had skipped every wasted word and gone straight to the only one that mattered. "You come over," I said. "He can't lift his own weight. If you pull him over the bars, you'll drop him on his head." "Understood." He let go of the rifle, set it down, deliberately, flat along the base of the railing where no foot would find it. An act so against everything those men are that the steward made a small wounded noise. And he put one boot on the lower bar, and came over the gilded railing in a single clean vault, white gloves and red wool and all, landing on the public side on the balls of his feet without so much as jolting the old man, whose wrist he never once released. Now he was on my side of the line. Now he was out of his world and into ours, the messy human one, where men fall and brains starve and good order counts for nothing against a clock. On the ground, I said, flat. Recovery position, his weak side down, no, the good side down, I want the bad arm up. Gently, support the head. He did it as if he had done it 1,000 times. He probably had, in some other life I knew nothing about yet. He went down on one knee on the cobbles, took David's whole weight against his chest the way you'd cradle something that might break, and lowered him to the stones so slowly and so smoothly that the old man's head met the ground like it was being set on a pillow. The bearskin tipped off his own head and rolled away, and he did not even glance after it. A guardsman without his cap, kneeling on the public cobbles, the most undressed and out-of-place thing in that whole grand square, and he had eyes only for the slack half of David's face. "David," he said. "David, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand." A pause, then the old man's right hand twitched against the white glove. Good man." The guard looked up at me. His face was no longer carved. It was the face of someone counting. He squeezed with the right, nothing on the left. I know I saw. I dropped to my knees on David's other side, 2 fingers at his throat, eyes on his chest, pulse fast, thin but there, breathing, yes, airway clear for now, conscious, drooping, weak on the left, speech slurred. "What's the time? Does anyone have the time? I need the exact time." 9:41, the guard said instantly. He had not looked at a watch. He simply knew, the way a man on a timed post always knows. He was upright and talking when I marked him from the walk. That was 4 minutes ago. 9:37, give or take 15 seconds. Onset under 5 minutes, witnessed. I could have wept. Do you understand what that is to a stroke nurse? Half the patients we lose to the question nobody can answer. When did it start? Found down at noon, but going to bed fine. Was it midnight? Was it dawn? Was it the minute before he was found? The clot-busting drugs that can give a man back his speech and his right side and his life have a window, and outside the window they will kill him, and the whole grim lottery turns on a time that a sleeping man cannot give you. And here was a witness who had clocked the onset to the quarter minute, because watching, exactly and unmovingly, was the one thing he had been trained all his life to do. "You're sure?" I said. 9:37, you'd swear to it." "I'd swear to it on the regiment." I believed him. I have never believed anything faster. The steward was on his radio now, white as the gloves, stammering something about a medical incident and a sentry off his post, and a second steward was running, and somewhere a sergeant's voice was carrying across the forecourt in the flat bark of a man who has just seen one of his sentries vanish over a railing and does not yet know why. The crowd had gone from 1,000 cameras to a wall of held breath. And in the middle of it, the guard knelt over the old man and said, in that same parade square calm, the thing that told me everything about who I was kneeling beside. "It's a stroke," he said, "not a question. Left side weakness." "So the bleed or the block is on the right?" "Yes." I stared at him. "How do you know that?" "Carried men off worse ground than this." That was all. He said it the way you'd say you'd carried groceries. "Before this coat I wore another one. Tell me what you need and I'll do it." I learned the rest of it later in pieces, the way you learn anything true about a quiet man, never from him. Before the ceremonial regiment, before the bearskin and the gilded railings and the tourists' phones, Corporal Rain had spent 6 years as a combat medic. He had knelt in dust and mud and worse and held men together with his hands while the help came, or did not come. He had learned to read a body for what it was telling you before the man could say it, because in his old coat the men he tended often could not say it at all. And when that life was over, he had not hung it up the way the rest of us hang up a hard job and walk away. He had carried it, folded small and silent, into a job whose entire requirement was to stand still and see. And on a bright Sunday morning, the two halves of him, the medic who reads bodies and the sentry who never stops watching, had met in a single 2-second glance across a crowded square and known together exactly what they were looking at. But I knew none of that yet. I only knew that the hands working beside mine were not a tourist's hands or a panicked stranger's hands. They were sure. They had done this before in worse places, and they did not shake. There was no time to ask the rest, and I have learned never to waste a willing pair of trained hands by interviewing them first. Keep his airway, tip the chin, watch the chest, and if he vomits you roll him toward you all in one piece, head and shoulders together. Talk to him. Keep him with us. Don't let him close his eyes and go quiet on you. A stroke patient who goes quiet is a stroke patient who's losing more brain. I'm going to check the other side of him. Yes, ma'am. And he talked to David. That is the part I want people to understand when they ask me what the soldier did. The catch, the vault, the calm, those were extraordinary, but it was the talking that I will remember until I die. This man, whose entire profession was silence, who had stood for hours that morning letting strangers shout in his face without so much as a blink, knelt on the cobbles and would not stop talking to a frightened old stranger, so the old man would not feel alone inside a body that had begun to lock its doors one by one. David, stay with me, David. You came to see the guard, didn't you? Well, you've got one now all to yourself. That's a fine bargain, a beat. You're going to feel me holding your head, that's all that is. I won't let go, you hear me? I won't let go. David's good eye rolled toward the voice. The fallen side of his mouth tried to make a word and made only a sound, but his right hand found the white glove again and held it, and the guard let him hold it and did not flinch and did not stop. Sentry. The sergeant arrived like weather. He was an older man, granite-faced, his own bearskin square and immaculate, and the look on his face when he saw one of his guardsmen kneeling capless on the public cobbles with his rifle laid down along the railing and a stranger's hand in his. I have seen that look on consultants who walk into a room and find every protocol they hold sacred lying broken on the floor. It is the look of a man whose whole world runs on rules, watching the rules be set aside, and not yet knowing whether what replaced them was a disaster or a mercy. Sentry, on your feet. What in the name of? Medical emergency, Sergeant. The guard did not get up. He did not even turn his head. He kept his eyes on David and his glove under David's skull, and he answered his superior in the level voice of a man reporting from a post he had not, in any way that mattered, actually left. Suspected stroke. Onset 0937 witnessed. This lady is a nurse. The casualty is conscious and breathing. I require an ambulance, the stroke pathway, and the time logged, sir. I have been in rooms where a senior man had to decide, in 1 second, whether to crush a junior for breaking the rules or to back him to the hilt. The good ones know that the second after you find the rule broken is not the second to litigate it. The sergeant's jaw worked once. His eyes went from his kneeling sentry to the old man's fallen face, and I watched the soldier in him lose the argument to the man in him. Or rather, I watched him understand that there was no argument, that his guardsman had read the only thing on that whole square worth reading and had been right. Logged, the sergeant said. He keyed his own radio without taking his eyes off David. Control, Sergeant Aldwin at the South Rail. Medical emergency, civilian suspected stroke, conscious. Get me the fast response unit and an ambulance on the priority pathway now, and you tell them onset 0937, witnessed by one of mine, and you tell them a nurse is on scene. Move it. He lowered the radio. To the guard, low, just for the two of them and for me. You'd best be right, Corporal Rain. I'm right, Sergeant. Then you stay where you are and you keep that man alive, and I'll handle the rail and the cameras and the inquiry, and there will be an inquiry and I'll stand it with you. A pause. The granite cracked just slightly. Good lad. And he turned and became a wall, the same thing his guardsman had become at the railing, only made of authority instead of red wool. He put his back to us and his arms out and his voice up, and a square that had been 1,000 pressing strangers became, In under a minute, a clear circle of cobblestone with an old man and a nurse and a kneeling soldier at the center of it. 2 more guardsmen wheeled out of the line at his bark and stood the perimeter, rifles clear, faces forward, holding back the crowd the way they were trained to hold back the world, except now the thing they were guarding was not a palace. It was one frightened old man's chance to live. "Pulse?" Rain asked me quietly. "Up, thready, holding." I had David's wrist now and my eyes on the second hand of the great clock above the gate. He's stable for the moment. The clock is the enemy, not the heart. Every minute that block sits there, he loses cells he never gets back. We don't fix this on the cobbles. We keep him alive, and we get him to the scanner. Then we keep him alive and we get him to the scanner, Rain repeated, and something in the way he said it, folding my words into his own and locking them down like an order received, told me he had spent a great part of his life being handed an impossible thing to hold and simply holding it. David's eyes were drifting closed. "No," I said. No, David, stay with me." A sliding consciousness is the next door slamming. I pinched the web of his good hand hard, the trick we use, and his eye flickered but did not open, and the fear that had been sitting under my ribs since the first second stood up and spread its arms. "David," Rain's voice changed, not louder. He brought it down, brought it closer, put his mouth near the old man's good ear, and what came out of that disciplined throat was not a command and not a comfort but a question, sharp and specific, the kind that hooks a sinking mind and gives it something to climb. "Who did you come to see, David? Was it the guard, or was it someone? Who's at home waiting on you to come back and tell them all about it?" The eye came open, drifted, found the red coat held. The fallen mouth fought it. "Margaret." "Margaret." Rain said the name like it was the most important word in the language, which just then it was. "Is that your wife, David? You came to see the guard for Margaret." A long smeared desperate effort. "She can't walk far any more, so I come and I tell her. Every Sunday I tell her what they wore, what they played." His good hand tightened on the glove. "She'll be waiting." "Then she's not going to wait long, and she's not going to wait alone," Rain said. "You're going to tell her about this Sunday yourself. You hear me? This is the best one yet. You got the whole guard down on his knees in the dirt for you. Margaret won't believe a word of it. You'll have to bring her a witness." His thumb moved very slightly against the back of David's hand. "Stay awake and tell me about Margaret. How long?" 51 years. 51 years. Rain looked up at me for half a second, and there was something raw in it, gone as fast as it came. "Then you've held a post longer than I have, David, and you don't get relieved off it today." "Not today. Talk to me. Where'd you meet her?" And David talked slurred, halting, the words sliding sideways off the dead corner of his mouth, but talking conscious. His mind kept up at the surface by a soldier reeling in his life one Sunday at a time. A dance hall. A blue dress. A friend who didn't show, so he walked her home in the rain. Every sentence cost him, and every sentence kept a door from closing. And I knelt there with 2 fingers on a fluttering pulse and the great clock crawling over our heads, and I prayed to whatever runs the world for the sound of a siren. This is the part the cameras never understand, the part that does not photograph. Everyone watching that square saw a soldier kneeling, and thought the kneeling was the whole story, the statue who came to life, the famous stillness broken at last. But the kneeling was the easy part. The hard part was the next 9 minutes of nothing, the part where there was no clot to pull and no drug to give and nothing in the world either of us could do but hold a thread that wanted to slip and refuse, by main force of will and a steady voice, to let it. Anyone can lunge. Anyone can catch a falling man in the heat of the moment. What almost nobody can do is stay, to kneel on a cold cobblestone for 9 endless minutes with a stranger's failing life in your 2 hands and your own future in pieces around you and 1,000 people watching, and not rush, and not despair, and not let 1 ounce of the fear in your own chest leak into the voice you are using to keep another man alive. That is not instinct. That is discipline. The same discipline that holds a sentry motionless for 2 hours in the rain was holding Corporal Rain motionless now over a dying man, and it was the most useful thing on that whole square. "Tell me about the wedding," he said when David's voice began to thin. "Blue dress to a wedding dress. How long between?" 2 years. David's good eye fixed on the red coat like it was a lighthouse. "Saved for the ring, worked the docks." A long pause. I pinched his hand and the eye sharpened. "She said yes before I finished asking." "Course she did," Rain said. "Smart girl, keep talking, the rest of it. I want all 51 years before that ambulance gets here, David, everyone, so don't you dare leave any out." "It came at 9:49. 8 minutes. In a city that size, on roads that choked, 8 minutes from the call. The fast response car must have been almost on top of us, and I have since learned it was, that the words a nurse is on scene and onset 0937, witnessed had gone up the chain, and that a control room dispatcher, hearing a witnessed onset inside the treatment window from a sentry of the KingsGuard, had thrown the call to the top of the stack. The lie that runs faster than truth is famous. Nobody tells you that, now and then, the truth runs fast too, when enough disciplined people pass it cleanly down the line. The paramedic came through the gap Sergeant Aldwin opened in the crowd, at a dead run, green bag swinging. He took in the scene, the kneeling guardsman, the bearskin lying abandoned on the cobbles, the old man flat on the stone, me with my fingers at the wrist, and to his everlasting credit, he did not waste one breath being astonished. "Talk to me," he said, going down on his knees. "David, 70s, witnessed onset 0937, so we're at," I checked the clock, 12 minutes. "Left-sided facial droop, left arm and leg flaccid, expressive speech affected, but he's following commands and orientated to person, conscious throughout, no seizure, no vomiting, airway maintained, breathing spontaneous. Pulse 110 and thready, irregular. I'd put money on atrial fibrillation, which means a clot, which means the pathway. He's a candidate. He is a clean candidate, and the clock is running." The paramedic's eyes came up to mine and held. It is a particular look, the one professionals give each other when one of them has just handed over a perfect report. "You're a nurse. Stroke unit, 22 years. Best handover I've had all year." He was already wrapping the cuff, slapping on the leads. "And you?" To Rain, who had not moved, who still held the old man's head in his white gloves. "Held his airway in his hand and his onset time," I said, before Rain could downplay himself, "because I have watched too many quiet, competent men erase their own part in a save. Caught him before he hit the rail, got him flat without jolting him, kept him conscious and talking for 12 minutes straight. If David walks out of hospital, it's because this man left his post." The paramedic looked at the guard for 1 second longer than the clock could really spare. "Then don't move yet," he said. "I need his head held while I get the board under him, and you've already got it." So the guard held. The ambulance backed through the cleared crowd, its doors flung wide, and the second crew came down with the board and the straps, and for 90 seconds the immaculate sentry of the KingsGuard was simply a strong, steady pair of hands keeping an old man's neck in line, while the rest of us worked around him. He took the count, ready, and rolled David toward him in one piece, log-rolled like a man who had done it under fire, and held the head and neck rigid while the board slid home. And at ready and lift, he took his share of the weight and lifted, and the old man rose off the cobblestones of the palace forecourt on a stretcher carried in part by the white-gloved hand of a guardsman who, 20 minutes earlier, had not been permitted to so much as look at him. They strapped him in. The leads showed exactly what I'd feared, and exactly what would save him. The ragged, irregular line of a heart in fibrillation, the engine that throws the clots that block the brain, and the paramedic met my eye and nodded, because now we both knew the story, and the story had a treatable ending if only the clock would hold. David's good eye searched the air as they raised the stretcher, frightened again, untethered, the way they get the moment the hands come off them. And Rain stepped in close one last time and put his face where the old man could find it. "You're going to the hospital now, David. These are good people, best in the city." He said it like a fact about the regiment. "You do everything this nurse and these crews tell you, and you let the doctors at that right side of yours and you fight, because you've got a Sunday to report on and a girl in a blue dress waiting 51 years for you to come home and tell her what the guard wore." He paused. "I'll tell you what the guard wore. The guard wore his knees out on a public cobblestone for you, David, and the guard would do it again. Now go." The old man's right hand lifted off the strap 2 inches, no more, and the fingers curled. It was not a wave. He couldn't make a wave. But Rain saw what it was, and he came to attention there on the cobbles, capless in his shirt collar and his rumpled tunic, and he brought up his bare right hand, no glove now. Somewhere in the work it had come off, and he gave that frightened, sliding old man the cleanest salute I have ever seen a human being render. Held it. Full 3 counts. A salute is a soldier's way of saying you are worth my respect and my discipline. They give it to officers, to the dead, to the flag, to the things they have sworn to serve. I have never before seen one given to a stranger on a stretcher. The whole silent crowd saw it too. Somewhere a woman was crying. A great many phones were up. And the old man, who could not lift his arm or work his mouth or feel the left side of his own face, looked at the soldier saluting him, and his good eye filled and overflowed, and ran down the half of his face that still worked, and the stretcher went up into the ambulance, and the doors closed, and the siren took him away into the traffic toward the scanner and the clot buster and the window that was, by the mercy of one man's eyes, still open. I went with him. I rode in the back and gave the alert call ahead, and at the hospital I handed him to a stroke team I would have trusted with my own father, with a timeline so clean they barely had to ask a question. Onset 0937. Witnessed. To the door inside 40 minutes. Within the window with room to spare. They took him straight past the queue and into the scanner, and the scan showed exactly what the irregular heartbeat had promised. A clot in a vessel on the right. A brain still mostly alive and starving. A thing they could reach. I'm not going to dress up what came after as a miracle, because it wasn't a miracle. It was medicine, delivered inside the window that medicine needs, to a patient whose every vital sign and every minute had been handed to the right people in the right order by a nurse who happened to be passing and a soldier who happened to be incapable of looking away. That is not magic. That is the system working the way it is supposed to work and so rarely gets the chance to. They gave him the drug. They went in and pulled the clot. And the next morning, when I came back off my own conscience to check on a man who was technically none of my business, David was sitting up in a hospital bed with the left corner of his mouth lifting, weakly, shakily, but lifting, into something that was, unmistakably, on both sides now, a smile. "You're the," he said, and the words came slow but they came whole, the consonants back in their places. "You're the nurse, from the railing." "I am." "They told me." His good hand found mine. The other one twitched and rose an inch off the blanket, moving, weak but moving. "They told me a soldier carried me. That can't be right. They don't move." "This one did," I said. Margaret was there. Of course she was there. A small, fierce, silver-haired woman in the chair by the bed, who had been driven across the city in the night by a grandson, who had not slept, who held her husband's bad hand in both of hers and rubbed it as if she could rub the feeling back in by force of 51 years. She looked up at me, and she did not have words and did not need them, and I have been thanked by a great many families in 22 years, and I will remember her face out of all of them. There was an inquiry. The sergeant had promised there would be, and there was. A guardsman does not leave his post, does not lay down his rifle, does not vault a public railing, does not appear capless and kneeling on the cobblestones before 1,000 cameras, without the regiment asking, formally and seriously, why? Discipline is the whole of what those men are. If the rule that holds a sentry to his post can be set aside on a whim, then it is not a rule, and then the red coats are only a costume. They were right to ask. I gave a statement. So did the paramedic. So did Sergeant Aldwin, who I am told stood in that inquiry room and said, in front of officers who outranked him, that Corporal Rain had made in 2 seconds a judgment the corporal would stake his own career on, and that he, the sergeant, would stake his beside it. And that if the regiment wished to discipline a man for the crime of being the only person on a crowded square who saw a dying man's face for what it was, the regiment had better start with him. They did not discipline Corporal Rain. What they did, in the quiet way those institutions do things, was harder and finer. They studied it. They found that a century's standing orders already carried, buried in them, the oldest exception of all, that a guardsman may break his post to preserve life, and that Rain had not broken the rules at all. He had found the one rule under all the others and obeyed it. And I am told, though this part I did not see, that they wrote it up, the whole sequence, the read and the catch and the time logged and the salute, not as a black mark, but as the thing the standing orders had always been for, and that somewhere in the regiment's own records there is now a line about the morning a sentry left his post, and was more a guardsman in the leaving than he had ever been in the standing. Because here is the thing I understood, kneeling on those cobblestones, that I had somehow missed in 22 years of looking at those men in photographs and thinking them statues. The stillness was never the point. I had it backward the way the tourists have it backward, the way I had it backward myself until that morning. We think the discipline is in the not moving, in the blank face, the fixed eyes, the man who will not flinch while the world shouts in his ear. We make a spectacle of it. We test it. We poke at it to see if it'll break. But the not moving is only the training. The discipline is in the seeing. All those hours of standing perfectly still, eyes forward, attending to everything and reacting to nothing, that is not a man switched off. That is a man tuned to the highest pitch a man can hold, watching, always watching, so completely that when the one thing comes that he is truly there to guard against, he and only he will catch it. The whole motionless apparatus exists for the half-second of motion. The statue exists for the man inside it to be ready. And on a bright morning at a gilded railing, with 1,000 laughing faces between them, the one face that was quietly coming apart was the face he caught, because catching it was, and had always been, the entire reason he was standing there at all. I went back to that railing weeks later on a Sunday. I don't know what I expected. The guard on post that day was a different man, a stranger, tall and red and carved and unmoving, looking through me and through everyone exactly as he was supposed to. And David was there, slower on the left side, a cane in his right hand, his speech a touch deliberate but every word of it whole, and beside him on his arm, in a blue cardigan that I would bet my life she had chosen on purpose, Margaret. They had come to see the guard. So David could tell her, the way he had told her every Sunday for 51 years, what they wore and what they played. He didn't see me, and I didn't break in on them. I just watched the two of them watch the silent soldier, the old man leaning a little on his wife, telling her something with that recovered mouth, and Margaret laughing, and the guard staring past them both into the middle distance with a face like stone. Looking, I thought, he's looking, he just doesn't let on. That's the discipline, not the stillness, the looking. A man trained to stand so perfectly still that he never misses the one who needs him, and to move, when it matters, faster and surer than any of the rest of us who spend our whole lives in motion and see nothing. I'm a nurse. I have spent my life learning to read the face that tells the truth the man can't. And I had to stand on a palace forecourt and watch a soldier do it cold, in 2 seconds, with no training but his post, before I understood that the most disciplined thing a person can do is simply not look away. David sends me a card every Sunday now, just a line, what they wore, what they played, and the last word every time in a hand that gets a little steadier each week. Watching,